Steve, I think this is the first time we've done the podcast on a Sunday. Is that correct?
Sure, let's go with that.
Okay. All right. Well,
I think so. We talked about it, but I don't think we've actually
okay.
pulled the trigger on it. So there you go.
Happy Sunday podcast hosting.
Good to see you on Sunday.
All you that celebrate.
There you go.
The holiest day of the week.
Day. Talk about capping your day with a religious experience. Here you go.
Yes. Okay, Steve. This is the Stuff Summer Says podcast with
Steve.
We kind of matched tonight. Look at us. Synthesis or whatever word. Synergy.
Colors on. Yeah.
I got my Coyote hat. Go Keys. Steve's got his Rangers orange on tonight. Okay. We've got a lot to catch up on. Every time we do these episodes in the summers, things are a little slower, and we're like, there's probably not going to be a lot to talk about. And then inevitably, 99% of the time, there is a lot to talk about. There is a lot to talk about. We've got a merger to talk about. We've got future schedules to talk about. We've got TV streaming things to talk about. And then this week's Old Guy, Young Guy. I just have a quick question. I'm interested to hear Steve. He's so excited. Look how eager he is.
It's always scary.
It's not stressful. I promise you.
Old guy, young guy. I've got this handle, and I'm thinking I'm in deep shit. That's what that means.
No, you're gonna be fine. I promise you. All right. Where to begin? With a question, as we normally tend to do. Steve, my question to you is this: more surprising merger this week, the PGA Tour and Live Golf, or Penn State's 2 NIL programs?
I'm going to go with Penn State's 2 NIL programs. Right?
That was my exact thought too.
I mean, it seemed like the people there were going to be silly for a lot longer than the people in golf were going to be silly. But people in both those mergers, came to their senses. Although we still don't know what happened with golf, and it may be years till we know who's doing what and whatever else. But yeah, I was more surprised by the Penn State thing because it just seemed like nobody was going to be able to get along. They had different things going on, and apparently somebody talked some sense into some people, and they're doing what should have been happening from the beginning.
That was the exact phrasing I sent to you, and I'll be candid enough to say it. I am pleasantly surprised that people put aside their egos to let something better happen for Penn State than necessarily themselves. Now, we'll see how this all shakes out. The website, I went on and kind of poked around and was like, okay, like who's all involved in this? Is it the old crew plus the new crew? Is there a new crew? And it's kind of murky. There isn't really a CEO yet. But for those of you that haven't maybe paying attention or just kind of catching up again, Success with Honor combining with the Lions Legacy Foundation, I don't know what it was called, to make Steve's favorite new soccer team, Happy Valley United.
If you're over 35 and you didn't think Happy Valley United when you think soccer when you heard that, you're just not over. I mean, that's what it had to have been, right? So
exactly. Yeah. There were some cryptic tweets going out this week that with the Lions ride and said United, and I was very confused and thought it was maybe like a Pride Month thing, except there wasn't a lot of color, so I didn't really quite get it. And ultimately, I think very much like you said, this is what should have happened from day one. All of these parties, Penn State at its highest level, which I guess when NIL really rolled out was more of the Sandy Barber era, or at least when we knew it was coming, probably should have had its ducks in a row a little bit better, probably cost them a basketball coach. I'm not going to rehash all of that, but it does seem refreshing and seem nice to hear that somebody called the shots and was like, you need to be on the same page. We need to stop fighting against ourselves, because that was my biggest gripe with this whole NIL system at Penn State specifically, is you looked at pretty much any other school, and yes, they might have had like little offshoot ones, but they still fed into kind of like a one big feeder system or one big bucket. That's the way it should work. Why go compete with yourselves? Why go have your petty little Twitter fights like Jay and Mike Motti did? I just think this is it kind of feels borderline too late, too little, too late, but at least it's in the future now. We're going to be fine. The other thing that I was thinking about, let me spin my crazy conspiracy theory here. Do we feel like Lions Legacy had some leverage over Success with Honor, basically because everybody was pointing the blame, especially after Motti's tweet, at Success with Honor for Shrewsbury leaving? and was like, you need to figure this out. And you need to rebrand yourself or people are going to start donating. Like, we don't know the financials yet. They are a 501c. So in theory, we could get the financials later on down the road. So I think that was interesting. I'm very fascinated by all of that. Just because Lions Legacy had leverage. They were probably in the right, that a lot of more people on Penn State Twitter were swaying that way than Success with Honor. And I think, you kind of wrote about it and hinted at it this week, but I think people are starting to realize that that was a bad idea kind of out of the gates.
Yeah, I think it was rooted in traditional approach at Penn State, right? And traditional approaches don't matter anymore. I mean, everybody's got to have a collective. Everybody's going to pay these players to compete in sports. It's just figuring out how you're going to say you're giving them the money, which may in fact itself change, shortly or in a short period of time with these collectives. Yeah, and it seems like you said, I think the Lions Legacy might have had the leverage, or at least some perception in terms of leverage. I don't know which one was really, I'm not deep enough into either one to know who was raising the most money and how it was fitting, but you needed one. Two, it was like, it's the old adage, which, may be changing too, but, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. If you have two collectives, you don't have any, right? You needed somebody to be in charge. And the challenge for me now, like, well, I think this is the right thing for them, and maybe not the thing for me to be supporting exactly, but the right thing for the program for sure. It'll be interesting to see who's in charge, right? Because I think that consulting group are going to be the people who are kind of still driving the boat and driving the ship, and whatever the analogy, right, and making it work, because all the people at Penn State have a job. It's kind of like football now, right? You got a director of the recruiting portal, you got a director of high school football relations, you got whatever else. There's going to be somebody who's in charge of the collective who isn't from the athletic department. And I mean, I don't know if they can, but I think there's going to be a lot of administration there in addition to the athletic department, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just an interesting thing to me about how this can be, I guess so complex isn't the right word, but it just seems like we should have gotten here sooner. And there should have been some grownups in the room somewhere along the line to make it happen sooner. I'm glad for the people who are supporting it, that it is happening. I think it'll produce results because there's enough crazy Penn State fans out there who are going to support it and do that thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting to me reading the press release. I don't exactly remember all of the names on either side, but two names that aren't here are Jay Paterno and Michael Motti. I think that's interesting. Those kind of two have been the vocal drum beaters, so to speak. One of the board's members is Mark, I'm going to butcher this name, Mark Toniati, who was the former CEO of Success with Honor. So it does seem like there is some overlap, but the group that you were kind of hitting at is the Blueprint Sports, which is essentially a collective of collectives, would be the easiest way to kind of put it. And it seems like Penn State went to them and said, help us fix this. Like, we don't want to make the same.
Or maybe they
mistake
came
twice.
to Penn State and said,
or maybe yes, yeah, or
one
maybe
the other, right? Yeah.
This is, for as much as I've been hard on Pat Kraft lately, this is a win, I think, in my opinion, for him. I think I don't know how much he had to say and kind of brokered the power of what his position is, but I think this is a win for him, because at least now, like I said, there's one collective, you know where to put your money. It's very clearly like Happy Valley United is a much better name than Success with Honor, because I know it's about Penn State. I know that it's about supporting something, being united behind something. I think that's great. Side note, the logo is incredible, kind of harkening back to that older lion from the early 2000s, 90s. But I'm just really interested to see where and how this goes, especially like thinking about it from my little minor conspiracy theory lens of maybe this is just like a rebrand. I hope it's not that. I think Lions Legacy Club probably had some better ideas. I like their subscription model. I don't know if you were familiar with that, Steve, but you could essentially pay 25 or 100, and it looks like that's carried over as well. We'll see. We'll see how this impacts, everything else. It seems like in other areas, it seems like the wins are suggesting that, Penn State is starting to keep up and kind of start to win ground in this area in terms of, transfer portal recruits, et cetera, this and that. So this almost, I don't know, the more I think about the NIL stuff, it almost feels like it needs to be if I don't hear anything about it, that's good. Only no news is good news, essentially, is kind of what I think about it. But I also want them to put their foot down in the same similar fashion that the Nittany Lion Club has, which obviously is a little bit different, but put their foot down and make those wins on the average. Maybe goes to one Penn State game a year, knows who the quarterback is, knows who James Franklin is, but beyond that, maybe doesn't, because I feel like probably there are more Penn State fans than maybe 5-10 years ago that did or didn't know about what the Nittany Lion Club is or was.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think not hearing about them is good in one sense, right? Because they're going to be doing their job, right? Like they're going to be raising money. People aren't going to be complaining that they aren't together. I think there's a strong cohort of people who, again, we do old guy, young guy. I think it's people, maybe there's people older than me or just my age who are more passionate. I think a lot of people are like, hey, that's the model. This is how you're going to win games now. This is how you're going to win national championships. I'm in. Stop being a curmudgeon about it. This is how it works. And I think people are going to be there to support it. I think the only thing that's not dangerous. The only thing it's all the collectives, right? The nobody knows anything, right? Because you can't release dollar figures or talk about what they're doing. And I understand the mentality of, hey, that might be divisive in the locker room or whatever else. But until you know what everybody is doing, or unless you know, then somebody else is doing something more. I mean, or at least that's the perception, right? And that's what it's always been in college sports. Oh, well, we don't know what they're doing, so we're going to do enough to make sure we can keep up. I think someplace we're going to get to the point where it's just like, hey, this is what a right tackle costs for the year. This is what a quarterback costs for the year, and I think that may come in the next couple of years as a result of all this stuff. Maybe it won't come that soon, but I think it's going to be the Wild West in collectives until that happens.
Yeah. I don't know if I see it necessarily shaking out that way. I do think we're going to get to a point where if you're a football player, your base pay is going to be $100,000 this season. And if you're a basketball player, it's going to be $50,000. And if you're an Olympic sport player, you're going to get $10,000 or whatever it might be.
Is there a number you're uncomfortable with them getting?
No, because they
like I know you just pick a number.
No, absolutely. They outside of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, every college, every reason that what a college is because of their athletes. Oral Roberts, no clue what it is. The only reason why I know what it is right now is because they're playing really good baseball. Like that is the only reason why I know who or what Oral Roberts is. Pick any school that went to the Final Four this year. Pick any school. No offense to anybody that goes to Alabama, has kids that goes to Alabama. Nobody goes there for the degree. They go there because they know about the football team. When I worked at U.S. News and World Report, we used to see a traffic spike anytime a certain school would do well in sports because people would go apply to that school more often. You see it happen every Final Four, Cinderella run. You see it with Coastal Carolina is probably the prime example of that. So no, they can get as much money as they want, Steve.
Just checking.
You're
no,
like,
I'm just checking. That's all good.
I know how you are about it. And I feel like we're gonna it's kind of like how when New Jersey opened up sports betting. It's like, okay, if New Jersey can do it, well, anywhere can do it now. And I think it's just like it's the same.
So it's been
same
about
thing with like
45
weed
seconds
sales,
from
like
from Alabama and the folks in New Jersey. Oh, if New Jersey can do it, we can do it. Nice.
But it's just it's all about the dollar. I have no problem with it. I do have, if it's coming from the university, I do want it to be a same flat rate across every level, and then they can go make money on top of that with their endorsement deals. I don't think an Alabama or a Penn State should, just because they have more resources, should be able to pay $200,000 versus a Rutgers that can only pay 50,000 to a football player. Like I think there
Doubling
should
down
be
on beating up on New Jersey. Nice. Rutgers is the example. Nice.
That's fine. They're
There you go.
Rutgers, but you know what I'm saying. Like I think it should be a base pay that way, and then they can. There's a floor, and then there's no ceiling. They like if Olu wants to go make $10,000 off of a car deal, or if Drew Aller wants to go do this or that, go ahead. Like make the money. You deserve the money. I think we're also I do think we're going to get to a point where we're probably, I think it's a race. I think we're either going to see that happen, or we're going to see all these companies realize, okay, like a college kid having a $20,000 scholar or sponsorship does not drive me $40,000 in revenue. Like I think we're going to see a pullback on some of that type of stuff. I think
fair.
maybe somebody like a Caleb Williams or a Bryce Young, Nike might make a deal with them, and then they're signed for when they go pro. But I don't think we're gonna. I think we're gonna see some of these deals come back and bite people in the butt further down the road. I have no problem with. I actually have more problem with businesses giving athletes the money than me giving athletes the money, which I know kind of maybe sounds weird.
No, I don't. I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with the businesses doing it. I think it's the ones I've seen, the few I've seen in central Pennsylvania have been, I can't imagine they're not doing anything for the business, right? Like there's a law firm that has a sign along 322 with who is it? Abdul Carter, right? Nobody's calling them because they're not calling that law firm because the football player's there. That's just the law firm getting a rub from, and I just don't understand the business purpose. I mean, it's other than being associated and getting the rub of being associated with athletics in Penn State. Maybe it's cheaper than buying a relationship with Penn State through the actual channels, right, of sponsorship. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense, but I guess it doesn't have to make sense. So that's fine.
I am fascinated about that. I've noticed, I wonder, and we've even talked about this before on the podcast, like could we, not that we would, I don't think we would, but could we go pay a golf athlete $100, like, and say, could you come to an interview? Or same thing with, any of these companies. I don't think, and maybe there's a rule against it, but I don't think I've seen a company, at least at Penn State, that has a sponsorship deal with Penn State athletics and also has a sponsorship deal with Abdul Carter or pick X athlete here. So I think that's interesting.
Some of their base deals are to do media interviews, though. So maybe we're just not asking. Like, I mean, I think some of their base deals are to do interviews. So that's
what James Franklin's deal is it's a TV,
right?
Like he doesn't get paid if he doesn't do interviews, right, essentially.
Right.
So, anywhere else you want to go with the NIL stuff? Like, do you feel better about the state of Penn State's NILs now? Because I do.
Oh, I think if I were supportive of the effort in general, I would feel better, right? I think this is the right decision for them.
You just don't want it at all.
I know it's how business is being done now. It's not a business that interests me, right? Like I have a pro team. I've had this cover, I'm happy for them. I hope it works out for them. But for me, I mean, my logic was, do they need my season ticket money to help pay for scholarships or whatever else? Sorry, if Drew Aller is able to go out and buy a $2,500 set of golf clubs and he's getting the free car and all the football players are making at least 5 figures and I didn't give ticket money last year, they're doing okay. And yay for them, and that's great. So, but I do think 2 things will happen, right? I think that the pullback that you mentioned will happen at some point from businesses. They'll figure it out. And I do think we'll go to like a floor or some kind of cap. So the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Penn States or whoever don't price themselves out of, some other schools.
I wonder
if that's possible.
How do you feel? Let's remove football and basketball. Pretend Penn State was good enough at basketball. Throw those 2 sports out the window. Pick a men's volleyball player or a baseball player, or pick any sport that isn't one of those 2. Do you feel better? Like, do you think those guys should get compensated? I don't think I've ever asked you that question, so I'm curious.
I'm more comfortable with, because those are not, volleyball especially is not a head count sport, right? It's a right. So those guys are playing. There's like, what, 9 scholarships for volleyball. That might even be 9. It might not even be 9. It might be like 6.7 or some crazy number like that for
Right.
volleyball. Yeah, I think I'd be comfortable. I think there's a part where it's just right, and then you're weighing good and bad. So this is like the live therapy session, right? Like, there's a pace where it becomes just too much for what they're doing, or go do something else to I don't know. Yeah, I think I would be better with the Olympic sports athletes in some ways than the ostentatious, crazy. Like, because if you go through the list for me in my world, right, it's the scholarship, it's the room and board, it's the books, it's the healthcare, it's the grants, it's the stipend. Like, none of these people, none of the student athletes at major sports, bring back the football and basketball, none of those kids are struggling, right? The volleyball player and the golfer might be struggling in some ways. They might have to pay to be here. So I think I'd be more comfortable with that. But I don't want anybody saying, in my mind, I don't want to hear the football players and basketball players are struggling. You can say they make money for the university like you did and they open the doors. Yep, you're right. But don't tell me they need the money to make it, because they just don't in this world, even before NIL stuff.
Right. No. Let me ask you this question. Would you in favor of getting rid of that kind of floor, would you support every student athlete, regardless of sport, getting a full ride? Like Penn State could afford it. Like, it's not that expensive.
No, it's got to cost less than what they're doing now at the collectives, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, in terms of actual money they're turning over.
Right. Would you rather that, or would you rather?
Oh, I'd much rather that, right? Like,
Okay.
yeah, you've taken a skill set and you've parted it into your education. And I get the argument the music major, right? Here's the music major who can sing, who might be going downtown to the bars and doing live mic stuff before this, and they can get paid, right? Because they were doing something, but they aren't on scholarship. Well, they might have a scholarship. I would be.
The scholarship's different though. I am. The reality of it is, the scholarship for a football player is for them to go play football. It is not for them to go study. For a scholarship for music, or somebody like me, or any of your kids, or pretty much for the most part anyone, is to go get the education, to knock down the cost of the education. So I think that maybe that's where we go with it, like, is a start. I'm sure that the student athletes will ask for more. I think they have the right to. Again, I've never had a problem with students making. I've never understood that. Like, my entire life, I've never understood why kids can't go make money off themselves, essentially, because they're amateur. Like, that doesn't
Yeah, I mean,
mean
the
anything.
NCAA did that before, like, 4 years ago, when they cracked down on the jersey numbers, right? We're only going to sell the year.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to sell one. We're going to sell 23 because this is 23, and we're going to sell one more random number. Go ahead and let us sell the jerseys. Give them a piece of the jersey. Give them. I mean, I think, and then maybe that's it, because the NCAA was so tight-fisted and anti-student athlete in some ways, that now this stuff opening up just is a whole new world, and feels different and weird. But, and I don't even know if I think the part, honestly, that I may struggle with the most is we're just not honest about it. They're being paid to do it. Stop
100%.
telling me they're paid for this, and then they got to do some community service to get paid. No, stop it. Like, no, like, they're not doing the community service because they want to do it. They're doing it because they get paid, right? So let's just pay them and stop that silliness.
I don't think Drew Lar, working with that home remodeling company, whatever it's called, is learning that much. Like he's just, you are just
and
paying him to use his image for
eight
on your
football players
ads.
showing up at some lady 80-year-old's birthday or 90-year-old's birthday at the local nursing home in Center County. Cute story, but they were all paid to be there. Like, it'd be different if on their own free will, they're like, hey, let's go together and go do this, right? No, someone said, hey guys, they requested some football players. If you guys go, this is going to count as one of your appearances. And of course, you're getting paid for those appearances. So that's all. Like, I think if we were more honest about all this stuff, I'd be comfortable with it a lot more than I am.
All right. I think that's very fair. I think that is very fair. All right. We just went 25 minutes almost on that. That was good.
Yeah, good. We can beat up the schedules now.
All right. Let's beat up the schedules. We will, here's how we will do this. We will discuss the future schedules first, and then we will come back and discuss the new schedules, the current schedule. the 2024-2025 opponents are out for all of the Big Ten. Essentially, what it boils down to is some schools have 3 protected rivals, some schools have 2 protected rivals, and other schools have 0 protected rivals. Actually, one does, Penn State.
Did you want someone protected?
What's that?
Did you want someone protected for Penn State?
No, I'm good with it. I think this is it's fine. Like as much as people have like joked on the unrivaled narrative, I am 100% fine with it because I am sick of seeing the same exact 7 teams every season plus 2 conference opponents, which for however many years was Iowa essentially or Illinois. Like it was either Iowa or Illinois was always in that third slot. The main headlines, if you're a Penn State fan like us, the big one is Ohio State comes to town in 2024, but Penn State does not play them in 2025, which would be the first time. I didn't realize this, first time since Penn State joined the Big Ten that Ohio State and Penn State won't play. And then the other big news is in 2024, USC will come to town. And then Penn State will also go out to USC in 2025 with UCLA coming to Happy Valley in 2025. All in all, that 2024 list of opponents, which is Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, and USC at home, Indiana, Purdue, and Rutgers, Wisconsin away, a very favorable schedule, for Penn State. They, in reality, survive the gauntlet of playing Ohio State, Michigan, and depending on how good, they'll have to play Michigan State, but USC could be good or they could not be good. It's we don't know how they're going to play in the Big Ten. We also don't know when that game is going to be, and I really think that that's going to have something to say in all of this.
I hope it's November. I want to go to Madison for the first game of the season. I want to open there again.
Like, 100%. Yep.
And let's have USC sometime in November.
This was that was the exact conversation that we had in our house. The interesting thing for me in all of this is Nebraska still does not show up on the schedule away. Penn State still has not played there with fans in the stands since my freshman year, which was in the 2012 season. So I think that's relatively interesting. It's good to see that the triad of Michigan State, Ohio State kind of gets protected for Michigan, because I think those are always interesting games. I'm interested to see how this iterates in the future, just because I have to wonder if Penn State with Maryland and Rutgers joining the Big Ten, who knows? Like I'm interested to see if one of those teams kind of slides back onto the schedule permanently. But yeah, no, I'm not heartbroken by this schedule at all. I think the 2025 schedule in terms of sex appeal, in terms of the home schedule, is not really there. UCLA is your marquee home opponent, and you've got to go to Iowa, Michigan State, and USC. Who knows? That Michigan State game will probably be at Ford Field or Heinz Field or pick a stadium. So I think that
2024 in terms of playoff stuff, right? Now,
great.
Looks awesome. 2025 looks like a rough road.
Yeah, which is fine. You're going to have those seasons in the Big Ten, and I think that's what you sign up for. It was interesting. I read a piece. I forget the name of the writer, and it was out of one of the Nebraska papers essentially this week, of all of the West teams are probably kind of shaking in their boots because they have to realize that, oh, now we have to go play these other schools that we've pretty much been locked in. We've avoided because they're in the other conference. I think that's been we now know that divisions are gone. That to me is very refreshing to hear. I think this sets the Big Ten up to be the 1A, 1B conference in the country. I think that's what this schedule does.
I think that's fair. I would think that one division play may only last 4 years.
I think we're going to get into a pod structure when like two more teams change.
Because I just think at some point, several coaches are going to be tired of finish 8th, 9th, and 10th, right? In a division, in a conference, right? And that's just harder to spin in terms of whatever. So, I mean, it doesn't make them any better teams, doesn't make the schedule any different, but And maybe it could, I guess. I would be surprised if the Big Ten or the people who are consistently 14th or 12th or whatever are comfortable with that 3 or 4 years from now. So we'll see. Maybe it'll rotate through, but
yeah, we don't know what the rotation is going to look like. It looks like there's really no rhyme or reason, especially for Penn State. Do we think the unrivaled thing was by accident or on purpose?
it has to. Well, you got to have it. It's got to be on purpose, right? If you're of the Kool-Aid drinking, they hate us. We're on the road all the time. We never get home basketball games on a Saturday. All that stuff in the Big Ten. Hey, you got to believe it's on purpose. But if it is, it's not punishment. Like this is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody wants to be stuck with Michigan State every year or Rutgers every year or Maryland every year. And you weren't going to get Ohio State and Maryland every year. You just weren't. So this is great. And you're not going to have to deal with Ohio State and Michigan every year en route to the playoffs.
I think that's the biggest thing for Penn State, especially that 2024 schedule. Penn State, like, I very much have the expectation that Penn State probably should make the playoff this year. If they miss the playoff in 2024, it's fireable for James Franklin. And that is the first time I've said anything remotely like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. People will probably feel that way. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that soft answer. Nothing else really stood out about that one to me. But it was nice to have a little fun.
Yeah, it was a cool kind of unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, last week with the merger and with that, like there was news going on. So
yeah. Well, and the other thing we still don't know is, and I did the math on it, that the 2025 schedule, it would have to be it's got to be a 1, 2, 3. That would be 4. So it's got to be a home opponent. We still don't know who that's going to be for the like Power 5 slot, so to speak. Right now, it's versus Nevada and versus Villanova. So you would expect that there's going to be in 2025 a good non-conference rolling into town, or maybe not, given the way that things have trended.
I was going to say, I'm not holding my breath for a good non-conference. I mean, West Virginia is a good non-conference just because they're regional and close.
Yeah.
I guess regional and close are the same thing, right?
You've got Syracuse in 27 and 28.
But yeah, I'm trying. Who's the level of West Virginia and Syracuse, right? We're not going to get Oregon to come in. They're not going to get Oregon to come in. They're not going to get. It's going to be some.
I still think it's that non-conference or the non-conference neutral site game that James Franklin has been hinting at for the last 20 years.
I thought he didn't want those. I thought he didn't want to go to Texas and play somebody.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he wants to go on campus to go play someone.
Okay. Well, yeah. If you want to go to Arlington and play LSU, do you want to go to Arlington and play LSU?
No.
Or would you rather play Syracuse?
Yeah.
But
then,
I think the head coach thinks that way too. Like I don't.
But if you slip up in that conference schedule, you're not making the playoff unless you win the conference.
But if you lose the first one on the road at Arlington against the non-conference neutral site, that makes it a lot tougher. And 2025 is already a tough road. Like I think 5 minutes ago we talked about it being a tough road. That's why I think it's not a.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
That's a rough away schedule because regardless, that's an away game.
It's got to be interesting enough to sell some tickets, but not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, moving on. The other big news that came out while we were off air is that we've got more kick times. You can see all those at stuffsummersays.com. We mainly have. We now know that we've known West Virginia, we have known Iowa, and we knew the Ford Field game. We now know that Penn State will play Delaware at noon, and then they will play Illinois at noon, and they will play UMass at 3:30, and the Michigan game will be at noon. But I think the interesting caveat that kind of tees up this week's segment is that Delaware game will be locked into Peacock. It will only air on Peacock. There was another game with Washington and Michigan State that is airing. I think that is, let me pull what week it is, but that game is also airing directly on Peacock. Here we are. Welcome to the new contract. And this was a good slap in the face. I think that was kind of the most interesting, fascinating thing. So your question to me this week via text message was what, Steve?
Oh, I forget how I phrased it.
It was essentially like, how good
Too
or
early to
bad
talk
is
about
Peacock
Peacock?
for
Yeah.
sports? And I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I know yet.
It didn't seem like there was a lot of uproar, at least on social media by it, regarding it. But again, the folks on social media know where to find Peacock, or they have it, or they know what's going on, the people that are really living there. And I don't know that it's a big deal, but it's a change. It's going to be the first time in 244 games that they haven't played on cable or over-the-air TV.
Is that
That's
a big deal
something.
anymore? Is it?
I don't know. It feels like it's okay. Again, old guy, young guy, right? To me, it's something because unless Sam's friend's Peacock account still works on this TV, I'm listening on radio. Well, I'm listening on the app. Honestly, I've moved from the radio to the app, but and it's not a
If
big deal. It's not a huge deal that way. Like, because I don't mind checking the game out on radio every once in a while. But I think it'll be a change for some. It's not as big. I don't think it's as big as Big Ten Network in 2007.
No, God, no, it doesn't
You know,
change. No, that the Big Ten Network changed the way we watch Penn State sports. Like
right?
there's now Big Ten days and there's all of this other stuff all the time. I think for me, Peacock actually benefits people that enjoy going to the games because now you have to you either have to have Peacock, which doesn't cost that much money to get, or you have to, you have to go to the game to see the game. And I think people at Penn State are probably fine about it. I would love to hear from a Michigan State fan that maybe doesn't go to every game about this Washington game, or actually who I'd really love to hear from is a Washington fan that kind of gets screwed and locked into this
Right.
because NBC does not have a Pac-12 deal. So that to me is the most interesting thing about it right now.
If you were Delaware, it was ESPN3 for whatever game you were.
Right, you're used to this. Yeah, you're used to
Yep,
this.
that's fair.
So what I am fascinated by from our sports media perspective is how many people are still going to tune into that Delaware game and how many people are still going to tune into that Michigan State game. And going back to your point earlier, do people within the conference see those numbers and start to bitch because they're like, why is Charlotte or Wisconsin at Washington State on ABC and my game's on Peacock? What the hell type thing, essentially.
Right. No, yeah, and it was always that random before. I mean, it was always that different before. Like, what was the difference between the game that ended up on Fox Sports 1 or whatever else? And in some ways, this is again a compliment to Penn State. You're gonna put a game out there that people want to see, that a fan base is gonna attempt to view. ESPN2 did it years and years ago when cable was, they were launching ESPN2 and they would put Duke and North Carolina basketball games there because they knew they'd draw a number and they could do that. So this is the same thing that's happened. This is the same reason that Penn State played on Friday nights on FS1, twice against Maryland and Illinois and somebody else, right? Was there 3 of those or just 2 of those? So yeah,
there's a couple of those.
Yeah. So I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's going to be the uproar that we've heard before with other changes, but it is different. It is the first regular season Penn State game that's going to be on a streaming service exclusively.
As somebody that is the child of people that are your age, I am anxious about having to explain to my mother how to get to Peacock. And I'm sure that there's tons of other kids that are my age that are already fretting that conversation with their parents / grandparents.
That was going to be my next question was where will Bev be watching the game at?
She might have a ticket for that one. So I'm not too concerned about that one.
Oh, that's right. Home game.
But the other Bevs in the world.
There's others?
There are, well, not, I mean, I'm sure there's other Bevs, but there's only one. But those ones, I know that this is going to be a point of contention for Penn State fans. Mm-hmm. People are going to bitch about it just because that's what's our Bob and Mary Jean from York, PA age,
who were laboring up there into section WH or WG.
Yep, 79 now. They're going to have a tough time with this, and I think that is, I don't know. I'm interested. I wonder if I wonder if like, you know how on those Amazon Prime games, like the Pittsburgh affiliate picks up the
Mhm.
game. I don't
Doesn't
see
that
that
defeat the
happening with
purpose of
the
it? Yeah, I don't think
yeah, I
that's
don't
going to
see that
happen.
happening with like
Yeah,
NBC, like the local, like
no,
what would be
no, especially in
WJAC.
Pennsylvania, because every NBC affiliate in the state would say we're the Penn State. Look at us, we've been
That's
covering
true.
them.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
just can't. And there's not one. No, not going to happen.
Um, so I don't I really don't know. I think it will be better. I do think Peacock will be 100% better than the current situation of Big Ten TV or whatever the streaming and BTN Plus or Big Ten Max or
Please, I
whatever
hope
it's
so.
called. I think it will be significantly better and beneficial for the Olympic sports. I think it will be very nice, hopefully, that you can go watch hockey when you want to watch hockey and not have to shell out a decent chunk of
You
change.
think? You think they're going to do that?
That I think that was part of the agreement. I remember reading
Mhm.
that like Peacock has to show those level sports. And also, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why not compete with ESPN in that sense? Like, I don't know if the Big Ten maybe would have been as excited to make the move to these other broadcast networks if
Like,
that wasn't offered on the table. So I think that is going to change things dramatically. We're gonna see I think what we're going to see if that happens is an increase in sports fandom for a Penn State lacrosse or a Penn State baseball or a Penn State soccer because you can now easily more accessibly watch those games and it's easier for kids that are interested in those sports to watch Penn State because that's their connecting point with sports a
right.
lot of the times. Penn State hockey is a key example of that for me growing up as the Icers. That was you would always try to go see an Icers game because that was the closest best live hockey that you could get in Altoona. And then, kind of going forward with the new program, you're now going to be able to open up your eyes to so many more people that haven't still been able to get that Pagula ticket because it is hard to get. You got to know the right person, or want to check out what's going on with Penn State lacrosse after kind of the way the season ended, or know that when they were at number 1 or 5 throughout the season this year, paying attention. Same thing, men's volleyball comes to mind. Women's volleyball certainly comes to mind with how ravenous people are. I am interested to see what happens to sports like wrestling that get a little bit more TV air coverage, but not quite as much as basketball. And this is more on the Big Ten scope than just Penn State. So I am interested to see what happens with those. Do those get relegated regardless to Peacock? Like, where do you go with that?
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. That's about it for all the Penn State stuff. All right. This week's old guy, young guy. Simple question. Simple question.
Yes.
I was thinking about this. I was watching some reels the other day. Are you familiar with reels, Steve?
Mhm.
Okay. Was Steve Samsel growing up a Lego child or a Hot Wheels child?
Oh, that's interesting. Um, Hot Wheels.
Okay.
Hot Wheels. There was a set of no Hot Wheels. We had Lincoln Logs. We had a set of Lincoln Logs in the house.
Okay.
But yeah, Hot Wheels. I had a 5. There exists somewhere to this day, probably in my mother's house, a 5-gallon bucket full of Hot Wheels.
Okay. I was also a Hot Wheels
Yeah.
car kid growing up. It's still in the basement. I would probably give it to my nephew. There's his storage container full of Hot Wheels
Yeah.
cars. Like we and I used to set up tracks like in the house. I was just curious. I didn't know. Nowadays, like if I'm going to play with a toy, I'm going to play with Legos though, because I like the
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. And I would make this again for a grandchild or young child. I had a cousin who, interestingly enough, became an architect who took a big cardboard box, and cut it down one side so it opened up in like a big spread out city, and actually drew streets and buildings and places for the cars to park.
Mm,
And that got some use. So
okay, that's
a
cool.
Sharpie marker and a big cardboard box ended up, eliminating the need to go buy some Hot Wheels
Track
garage
City.
set or track. We had a little track, but that was still a pretty cool setup. So there you go.
Did you play with the? I don't. This one's good. This question's gonna date you. Did you play with the little slot cars? Did you have those?
Oh yeah.
growing up? Okay, I had those. Those were a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I
I
would
was
get
just
those
curious.
again too. Those still exist. And I vividly remember they had a thing called were they SSP cars? They had a ripcord that you pulled out of the middle of them and
Okay.
one big wheel that spun in the middle of these cars and then they would just go like whatever. And I
Okay.
was one of like eight male cousins in a range of like 6 years. And the grandmother got us all the same thing. So when somebody ripped open that one, you're like, okay, I got one of those too. What color's mine? Right? Like,
Okay.
but those are pretty cool things.
There's one more question I had on that. I don't remember. All right. I was just curious. I wanted to know. I figured you were going to say Hot Wheels, but
Yep.
good.
Susan
All
was a
right.
little big. Susan was big into Legos, but I was Hot Wheels.
Okay. Love all kinds of toys. Toys are fun. All right. Steve wrote something on the blog this week. I wrote something on the blog last week. Go read Steve's thing. Go read my thing. Steve's is very, very good, well thought out. Really kind of sums up Steve's opinion and anger towards NILs. I think that would be the best way to say
I
it.
was very supportive of the approach.
You were. It was when I opened that up, I was expecting my computer to catch on fire. It did not. So
There we go.
I'm
That's
happy.
because Steve likes his job.
No, we pay you the big bucks. Other than that, we've got a newsletter on the website. You can go subscribe to that. I think maybe 2 weeks away from the next one coming out. Yeah, 2 weeks away. And then let's see what else. We've got a YouTube page, which you're probably watching, maybe here, somewhere, over there. No. We've got a podcast. You just listen to that. 5 stars, thumbs up, all of that. Make sure you subscribe to everything too. That would be very appreciative. Really do appreciate those people that have. Make sure you email us if you want to email us. Mine's Darian at Stuff Summer Says. Steve's is
Steve at stuffsummersays.com.
and I think that's everything minus our Twitter handles, which is mine is at Stuff Summer Says. Steve's is
At Steve Samsel.
other than that, have a good week as we put this out probably on a Monday. So you can actually say that the week won't be
Cool.
over.
See ya.